Snider is with Pacific Justice Institute, and unless you've been living under a rock for about the last 10 years, you've heard PJI has fought and won so many lawsuits for us. Their entire organization is not based on profit. It's based on liberty and freedom, religious freedom and liberty just outright. Kevin Snider is the lead attorney. I'll have to look at my notes. Kevin Snider is the lead attorney for PJI, so we've got the most important, the big gun here. He has 2 children and resides in Northern California with his wife, Chen Yun. Is that close? That was close, okay. Kevin has fought numerous cases. If you listen to the radio ad that we had on KPRL this week, he has gone up against Gavin Newsom. It was Kevin who actually made it so that the homeschoolers in this state were not stopped and could actually continue with their homeschooling. PJI has been involved in all sorts of different litigation, and he's going to go over a lot of that with you. Think in the back of your mind, we basically have different ways that we can help this movement, and it's more than a movement. We're fighting for our life. We're fighting for our very survival, and most of you know that. It's not getting better. I was talking to Kathleen a few minutes ago, and it seems like where 10 years ago we were fighting on 3 or 4 fronts, now we've got 300 or 400 fronts to fight from all over, and it's not getting any better. So there's 3 ways that you can help. Basically with your activism, basically with your talent. If you can help an organization, let's say that you're really good at, like Gary is, at doing flyers and doing media, then you can help that way. And you can also help with your wallet. We need donations. Groups like PJI, Pacific Justice Institute, they're all donation. This is how they survive. So at the end of the talk, I know Kevin's going to tell you how you can become a donor. Mary and I are donors to PJI. We try and be very regular with our donations because we know how important Pacific Justice Institute is. So without further ado, Kevin Snider.
Well, thank you. And yes, I am an attorney. That's why I'm a bit overdressed tonight for this occasion. I am delighted to be here. I actually grew up not far from here in a little town called Morro Bay, and glad to be back here since 2nd grade. Tonight, the title of my presentation is The Intolerable Acts 2.0. And in view of that, it is appropriate that I am talking to a group calling itself a Tea Party group. The Boston Tea Party was not an historical event distant in time, place, and relevance. In his Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death speech, Patrick Henry said this, says, "I know of no way of judging the future but by the past." The American Revolution came about because the Crown, the government at the time, overplayed its hand. There were a series of laws that were passed called the Intolerable Acts. When you read your history books, you may have heard of them called the Coercive Acts. And Parliament sought to tax, regulate, and strangulate the colonists. Well, more than 200 years later, today... go ahead.
You gotta be loud so you can hear it.
There you go.
Without
Thank you.
getting in your way.
Yeah. Today, a number of legal scholars and political observers say that we are living in a post-constitutional society. That's unfortunate. That is frightening. But in the last 3 years, it doesn't take a college graduate or a bookworm to know that our liberties have been under great assault. Any governor, any mayor, public health official, regulator with the audacity or the hubris could and did seek to bully, to scare, and to deceive the public into submission. And consequently, there are consequences for those actions. And one of those is that the public has lost confidence in our public institutions, particularly the government. People no longer view our government entities as benign groups that are acting for the public good. Rather, they see government actors as malevolent forces that seek to harass, humiliate, and dehumanize the population. In 2020, the desks in classrooms sat empty, disfavored stores, store windows were boarded up. Public assemblies in churches were deemed non-essential, dangerous, and unwanted. Do you remember that Dr. Fauci said that when the pandemic came, that all we had to do was to go into our homes for 15 days and all of our pandemic problems would go away? And Governor Newsom followed suit. And 2 weeks turned to 2 months and then 20 months. And at first we went along with it. They scared us. They showed people in China with hazmat suits and spraying fog down the streets, and it scared us. And so, and I thought, well, there's really no real constitutional problem here because everybody's being treated equally. Well, there was a group of business owners in Sacramento who thought, you know what, they're tired of everything being closed down, so they decided to go to the state capitol, and they were going to stage a protest. Now what they did was they went to the California Highway Patrol, which handles security on the Capitol grounds. And so they asked for a permit, and the Highway Patrol denied their permit, saying, you know what, there are no public assemblies allowed because of this health problem, and it's not because of what you say, it's just because we have this. Well, they didn't go and break out windows downtown and that sort of thing. And what they did was they went to the federal court and asked for an injunction against the governor. And the governor went forward and he defended the lawsuit, saying it doesn't matter what these people say, everybody's being treated equal, there's no assembly uses. And so the judge, on that representation, denied the injunction. Well, it wasn't 3 weeks later, I smartened up. A man died underneath the knee of a police officer in Minnesota, and protests started raising up all throughout the state from Oregon to Mexico. This is what our governor said. He said, quotes, "For those of you out there protesting, I want you to know that you matter. To those who want to express themselves, God bless you. Keep doing it. Your rage is real," end quote. I then realized that church gatherings are prohibited. Progressive protests are allowed. It meant you could assemble based on the content of your speech. So across the nation, we were having these lockdowns. Santa Clara County was the worst place, the most restrictive place in the entire country, more so than New York City. The County Board of Supervisors passed an ordinance which concentrated power in the hands of the Director of Public Health. She deputized essentially all of the public health workers so that they can conduct warrantless searches. And the workers from the public health departments acted as the police, the prosecutors, and the judge. Investigations were commenced via anonymous accusations. You had no right to face your accuser, and fines were issued at $5,000 per day, every day. Churches were being fined. I met with a rather large church that got into the national media in the Santa Clara County area. Their fines had gotten up to $90,000. There were other churches got into the 6 figures and one into the 7 figures. It was like the old gasoline station. Remember, they had the bell that would ring every gallon? So that's how every day, whether the church was open or not, they were being fined $5,000. And if anyone dared to contest the county's public health order, well, they got to appeal to guess who? The county itself. But that's not all. Fines were required to be paid before a finding of guilt. It was like, do you remember the children's story, the Alice in Wonderland, and they had the Red Queen, where they had sentence first, verdict second? That's how things worked. Well, the Santa Clara County Deputy District Attorney told the New York Times, quotes, "I don't feel comfortable being in that position of saying, you know, your constitutional rights don't really matter right now. But I've had to. Right now, we're putting parts of the Constitution on hold. We really are. Freedom of assembly, right to practice religion," end quotes. When I say that the Intolerable Acts 2.0 were alive and well, that our liberties, the Bill of Rights, were suspended, that is not hyperbole. That is not a conspiracy theory concocted on the internet. That is their language, that they are putting parts of the Constitution on hold. A group of 5 churches in Santa Clara County, as their buildings sat vacant month after month after month, contacted an attorney who contacted me asking if I would represent them. And we had been filing lawsuits, as with other groups, all across the country, and to no avail. We were losing one after the other after the other. And but they said, but their churches were empty, and they felt they had nothing left to lose. So I met with them on Zoom back then. Everything was on Zoom. And they said, what would a lawsuit look like? And I said, well, we'll file what's called a motion for preliminary injunction. Sort of the idea is to stop the train. And we'd file that in the district or trial court. And I said, that's going to be denied. And they said, and then what's going to happen next is I'll file an emergency motion with the Ninth Circuit. And they thought, the Ninth Circuit, that doesn't sound promising. I said, no, it's not promising. Then they said, what's next? The Supreme Court? And I said, yes, that's the last stop on the train. And they wanted to know, what are our odds in the Supreme Court? And I said, they're about 1%. And that's not hyperbole. I'm not being a drama queen. That's the batting average. It's about 1%, actually a little bit less. And so it happened just as I said. I filed in the district court. Motion was denied. Filed an emergency writ in the Ninth Circuit. And that was quickly denied. So the last chance was with the Supreme Court. And so I worked through a holiday weekend. I think it was similar to one of these weekends. And filed it. And I got a strange call from a CNN reporter who handles the beat at the Supreme Court. She said, I want to know about this petition you filed. And I thought, don't you know there's only a 1% chance of it being granted? But she was curious, so I talked to her. And I filed it on a Tuesday. It goes to, the way it works, it's very much like it's an emergency instrument. It's very much like what you see with a death penalty case where they're trying to prevent someone from being executed. And so it goes to to one justice who has a certain part of the country, and in California happens to be a Justice Kagan. And so I filed it with her, and she, instead of quickly denying it, she referred the whole matter to the whole 9 justices. And they ordered that the other side file a response. And on Friday evening, I got an email at 6:30 at night. It was 9:30 on the East Coast, that we got a 6-3 decision, and that the churches could open the following Sunday. So, thank God. And so, but it takes courage. It takes people willing to face great odds. Well, so I'm unfortunately, though the churches were opened up, we still have tremendous problems with this administrative state. And right now I'm representing 3 other churches in San Diego County, suing the California Department of Social Services and the Attorney General. You see, they want to have a Christian preschool, and they don't want to be licensed. You wonder, what in the world would you not want to have a license if you're a Christian preschool? After all, they're looking after kids. Well, I looked into this. Come to find out, the Department of Social Services banned their preschool director, one of them, for the remainder of her life from employment, presence, or contact with children in licensed facilities. Social Services appeared unannounced at this preschool 7 times in less than 3 months, staying for up to 9 hours at a time, interrogating 3 and 4-year-olds without parental knowledge or consent. One child, and I'm thinking of 2 children in particular, went to a four-day trial on this. This was their place of joy and belonging. One child would complain on Saturdays and Sundays why she wasn't in school. But that all changed for some of the children. One child would not get into the car. Another one grabbed onto the parent's leg and did not want to go in the classroom. And they said they were afraid of the bad ladies. And those were the social services interrogators who would question these children. And it shook them. Now you ask, what monstrous thing did this preschool do? Well, they would not keep masks on 3 to 4-year-olds because their parents said, we don't want you to put masks on that, and they could not assuage the parents and the state. And the state said if it's a choice between the state and the parent, the state is the decider. And so they shut down that preschool, a very large church. And so we are suing over that. And so again, you ask, why do you fight these licenses? Well, one of the things is that, like the County of Santa Clara, the way the regulatory scheme works is these social service agents, they show up on church property without warrants. They use anonymous complaints. They're able to go through files which will contain the parents' financial information, may have counseling information, may have clergy penitent privilege, things people talk to with their minister. These regulations, if you violate them, it's a criminal act, but they don't Mirandize the employees that they question. You know what Mirandize is? Do you remember 1 Adam 12 from many years ago? You have the right to remain silent, anything, and anyone who has any brain, if you're the subject of an investigation, what do? You say, I'm so sorry, I won't be able to accommodate you. You'll have to talk to my lawyer. And my lawyer will respond with the merit that this deserves. And so anyway, that's why they've done that. And Christians have been taking care of children. They would be children with birth defects, those who are girls, those who are unwanted for over 2,000 years when they would be exposed. And they've done that in all places, at all times for 2,000 years, taking care of the weakest or the least of these. And they've done it without the help of the state of California. And so they want to go forward. And one more thing that California requires is that Christian preschools cannot require the children to attend religious services or engage in those activities. Well, for a Christian school, that is a necessity. Otherwise, it's not a Christian school. So we're challenging that. Well, the Golden State's version of the Intolerable Acts is not confined to businesses and churches. It's also invading our private lives into our homes. A parent called us seeking legal representation because her 16-year-old daughter was taken by Child Protective Services. You see, her daughter says that she is her son, says that she is a boy. And sadly, this girl made a suicide attempt, and so found herself speaking with a psychiatrist. And when she saw the psychiatrist, she mentioned that her mother, who is a Baptist, doesn't go along with the idea that her daughter is her son, and won't use the pronouns, the the male pronouns, continues to insist on using the female pronouns. And so the psychiatrist reported the daughter to CPS for abuse and neglect. And so CPS put this teenager into a foster home. And of course, because she says she's a boy, they put her in a home with troubled teenage boys. Guess what happened to her? Twice. And did the county come and rescue her? Oh no. The reason is that their ideological commitments are to a gender transition and LGBTQ issues is really at the point of a religion. It is not falsifiable, and so they insisted on that. Well, the county filed a petition in court to terminate parental rights, and this is what they wrote to the court. They said, quotes, "The mother continues to call the child by his birth name and will only use she, her pronouns, and in part, due to the mother's religious belief, is unwilling to condone and or accept her child's gender identity, causing the child emotional trauma." So not accepting your teenager's view of the world with regards to gender is abuse and neglect. Well, in my view, the government has it backwards. A young person who rejects cultural norms, rejects their own biology, rejects the faith of their parent, no wonder they're depressed. Well, fortunately, we had I assigned one of our best family law attorneys into this from PJI, and we thank God the court denied the county's request to terminate parental rights, and to my knowledge, the family is doing much better. But it is a real problem, and it is, again, an intolerable act that we're seeing with our government. During our study of the American Revolution, we concentrate on prominent military and political writers, and that is as it should be. Crisis creates the conditions for great men and women. But these heroes of the revolution would be nothing in their fight against the intolerable acts and the things of their day if it weren't for ordinary people who understood the times, shook off their apathy, and went forward to help, like those who tossed crates of tea into the Boston Harbor. Let me tell you about Samuel Whitmore. Is everyone, who's heard of Samuel Whitmore? Anyone? I've seen 3 hands. That's the biggest number I've seen anywhere. Samuel Whitmore, I don't believe to my knowledge, he didn't write any books. I don't know if he was literate. But he was one of the volunteers in the Massachusetts militia in the opening fighting between the British near Concord. And like many of the militia, he was a farmer. Now, he was a little bit past his prime. He was 78 years old and a bit crippled. But he decided he was going to get involved. And so he brought to this, when the call came out for the militia, he came out, he brought a musket, 2 dueling pistols, and a sword. And he stood behind a stone wall. I don't know if you've been to the East Coast, they still have them. They're about chest high and they're made of stone. And the tactics of the militia was when the British regulars would come by, they would shoot at them from behind the stone. It's a pretty smart way to do things. So sure enough, the British regulars went by, and up pops Whitmore, and he takes a shot at him. And he reloads and fires again, and loads his musket, and he gets off 5 shots and actually fells 3 of the enemy. Well, the British officer in charge had had enough of that old man. And so he ordered the British regulars to charge and take him out. And they did. They had a melee, and it's not like the movies. He got part of his face shot off, and they stabbed him with bayonets 13 times. I was thinking that's ironic. It's 1 for each colony, isn't it? But anyway, they stabbed him and left him for dead. And so his friends came by to get his body, and they found him not only still breathing, but he was trying to reload his musket. So they got a door and used it as a makeshift stretcher. They took him to a nearby tavern where a physician was tending to the wounded. The physician saw him and said, I'm sorry, it's too far gone. But they insisted, so the physician bandaged him up the best he could and said, I'm sorry, but your friend is not going to survive. So they took him home to his farm to die, and he did die. 18 years later at the age of 96. And so I must conclude by asking, how about you? Have you said in your heart, I'm too old, I'm too young, I'm too insignificant, I'm too busy? Are you sheltering in place, accustomed to tolerate the intolerable? Now, I'm greatly honored to stand in front of a group that calls itself a Tea Party and to be the descendants of the Tea Party. Now that we are facing the Intolerable Acts 2.0, the country is in need of your services again. So Godspeed to you in your work here in San Luis Obispo County.
Questions, yeah. Okay. All right, let me get over to you when...
Jennifer's first.
I have one too, if Jenny doesn't ask.
Hi, we recently saw Kevin Kiley spoke about a lawsuit that is going to be heard at trial on November 13th against Gavin Newsom, that's brought forward by some students and the harm that was done to them during COVID. Are you aware of that, and where is it going to be held, and who actually is bringing the lawsuit?
I'm basically familiar with it. I don't know more information than you have. They're bringing it on some unusual legal theories, and maybe they'll be successful. The legal theories are that in California, a right to an education is a right under our state constitution. So that's what they're bringing it under, and we'll see if the courts agree on that.
I just add, what's your opinion on the state bringing a suit against Chino Hills down in Southern California?
Yeah, I'm very familiar with that. As you know, the Chino Hills, what they did, the school board passed a resolution which said that when a child decides, or a pupil decides that he is a she or she is a he, they're going to inform the parents. School districts across the state, there are 1,000 school districts, many of them routinely lie to parents and have that in their written policies, and teachers are subject to being fired if they inform parents of that. So this is a shakedown by the state on this. I don't think that the Chino Hills has done anything unreasonable. There's no basis under the law to require schools to lie to parents, but we'll see. California is a very, very difficult place to litigate. I've litigated school law for almost 29 years or so. So this is a tough place. We'll see how they do.
Well, sir, you talked to us about people in the room and going forward and helping fight the cause. Okay, I think everybody in this room knows we're watching. Masking is going to come back. It's already coming back in some places, and they're going to try to shut down businesses. So what is your advice? Let's say we were under a mandate right this very second. It happened 1 hour ago. What would you say to us as a group of people how we fight that? Because we have to fight it. So what would we do?
Let me answer in two ways. One, as a lawyer, a member of the bar, I can't advise you to violate a law. As a citizen, I would say you've got to resist this. You've got to say no. And frankly, if people call me and ask about that and say, well, what didn't you learn last time? You maybe shouldn't be calling a lawyer, maybe you should be calling a psychiatrist, because you're just so naive. You need to just stand up and say, I'm not going to do this. And so that's my personal advice.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
When will there be a lawsuit that validates my rights? I have the right to believe that only a man or a woman exists in this society. When will there be a lawsuit that says that I can say that there is only a man or a woman, and all the other nationalities, personalities, and sexualities are hypothetical things? They are not real and within our society.
So we've got more than one lawsuit. We just settled a lawsuit in Michigan on that, settled it favorably with some cash. Unfortunately, these lawsuits come at a price to people, and I cannot tell you that you're going to go through and fight for your liberties risk-free. That's nonsense. But in fact, we are folks that have been fired from their jobs and for doing just what you say, and we're representing them in court, and we are anxious to see how that will turn out. I'm sure all of you read 1984 at some point, high school or college. If you hadn't, you need to read it. It should be required reading in high schools. Remember the saying 2 + 2 = 5? That's essentially what we have now, is businesses as a proxy for the government are forcing people to say something they know is untrue. And so the answer is we're litigating that issue.
Kevin, a little over a year ago, and I know that you remember, you helped Paso Robles School Board in a policy change that they were making, and we were trying to make sure that the school board did not vote in this basically change in the way that they treated their students in Paso Robles School District. And we didn't know how to fight it because it was law. And like you said, it's law. So there's really not a whole lot you can do. And we had one board member that said, it's the law, and until you change the law, there's nothing we can do. And actually, Jennifer was involved in that, and I was involved in that, and a few other school board members. Frank Triggs was involved in that. And you came up with a novel idea. You said, let's just kick the can down the road. Let's just get them to shelve it. And you said, until we can change the law, let's get them to put it to the side and not act on it. And you wrote a great letter, and thank you for that, from PJI in your own handwriting, in your own words, and basically told that school board that even though they could be sued by the state if they don't act, they for sure were going to be sued if they did act from the parents or other students. And that stopped it right there. And as far as I know, it's still shelved. It's still being considered but not acted upon. So I just wanted to thank you and have the rest of the group and the rest of all of you out there to know that PJI, they're there for us. They do good work.
By the way, was there any sign-up sheets sent to you? I have some in my car. If you want to be kept abreast of what we're doing, I'll go to my car and get some sign-up sheets, and we'll send you updates on our cases. And also, if you are interested in helping us monthly, you could do so at as low as $10 a month and be a member or part of our team. So.
Most of what happened the last couple of years, weren't they, at least in California, weren't they mandates and not laws? And isn't that a huge difference?
So that was argued at length in courts, and it just depended on which court you talked to, which judge you talked to. One of the problems was that judges tend to be institutional. They tend to want to protect the government. They've got everything bass backwards. The Bill of Rights is a 10 commandments that thou shalt not, that the people have placed on the government. It's usually the government writes laws for the people, but our Constitution actually tells 10 do's and don'ts that the government can't do, and so it has to obey. And so that's one of the problems is there's too much deference towards the government on things, and I think that's a problem. And as far as the mandates, like I said, depending on which judge you got, usually we got negative rulings from judges on that. We argued that very thing. Yes.
He's afraid I won't give it back. You may remember that we had contacted you about Kenny Enney, the school board member who was kicked off because he dared speak out against transgenders. It's funny because I was just looking over my papers on that whole thing, and we can prove that James Brescia, the county superintendent, was actively working for the other side that was seeking to have him kicked off. He's the county superintendent of education, and he was the guy who decided that the petition was legit and gave it to Elena Cano to verify the signatures. My understanding, and I have a degree in political science and I took politics and law, that Kenny's rights to due process were totally violated in that, but I could not find anybody who would take that to Superior Court and file. Is there any? I mean, I'd still like to get back at James Brescia because what he did was clearly against the law.
I guess the answer is that's typically something we can't as an organization engage in because we're a nonprofit, and so we can't do anything to support or oppose a candidate for political office. But there are political lawyers, election law lawyers, who do take those kinds of cases, and I give you referrals to someone who might be able to do that.
My name is Dale Augustin. I do attend the school board meetings all the time. And the problem arose that we had a conflict between the educational law and the election law. Now you would think election law would trump on elections, but it didn't. Jim Brescia decided that the educational law said that Kenny Enney had to stand for an election if there was enough people that petitioned for it. And that's what happened. Now, luckily, enough of us got behind Kenny and got him elected. But it cost the school board a lot of money for that damn election. Now, another thing, that going back in the history of the school board, I remember when Chris Bausch was the only dissenter when they were digging a hole financially and on overspending and corruption. And they chastised him. I argued against that. And finally, the grand jury took up the case, told the school board they were wrong. And now, the only one that's still around on that board is Joel Peterson. Nobody ran against him, unfortunately. But my question is, as to Donald Trump and the free speech, do you think his free speech rights are being violated by these suits?
Well, certainly. Well, if they're basing what they call the predicate act on his speech on January 6th, I think it is. I have a good friend named John Eastman who was one of his attorneys, and he's before the state bar. It looks like they're going to try to disbar him. It's very unjust what they're doing, and also he, along with 18 others, were indicted in Georgia. So it's we're sort of like a banana republic. We don't even grow bananas. It's rather. So.
They're trying to disbar the attorney that represented.
Yes, for representing him. Yeah.
That is amazing.
I just wanted to know if the church has got any relief on those lawsuits in California.
Well, yeah, we won and got paid by the state of California for our work on it. So yes.
Oh, good. Wonderful.
So.
Any more questions?
All All right, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kevin.